Imagine a man consumed by vengeance, wielding dark magic to destroy his enemies, only to become a revered Buddhist saint. How did Milarepa rise from betrayal and guilt to sing songs of enlightenment? Join us on a gripping journey through his trials, uncovering the heart of Buddhist wisdom. Can a broken soul find liberation? Watch to discover the transformative power of the Dharma and how it can light your own path. Share your thoughts in the comments. What does redemption mean to you? Hit play and let's explore together the shadow of vengeance. In the shadow of Tibet's snow-draped peaks, where the wind howls secrets older than time, a boy named Milarepa came into the world, his cries mingling with the whispers of a destiny yet unwritten. Born into a family of modest wealth, his early years were kissed by the warmth of a mother's love and the promise of a life unmarred by want. But fate, like a river carving stone, has a way of reshaping even the firmest foundations. Can you feel the weight of that moment? The innocence of a child unaware of the storms gathering on the horizon. Hold that thought, for it is the spark that will ignite a tale so profound it will stir your soul and keep you tethered to these words. Milarepa's father, a man of gentle disposition, ensured the family's fields bloomed and their hearth glowed. But when death came too soon, as it often does, it left a void that greed eagerly filled. Picture this: a young boy, barely old enough to understand loss, watching as his father's final breath dissolved into the mountain air. His mother, Kyungsa, stood resolute, her heart a fortress against despair, believing her husband's kin would honor his dying wish to protect their wealth for Milarepa and his sister. But trust, like fragile prayer flags in a storm, can fray under human avarice. The boy's uncle and aunt, entrusted with the family's legacy, turned their backs on kinship. They seized the fields, the yaks, the very roof over Milarepa's head. What would you do, stripped of everything you thought was yours? Stay with me, for this betrayal is but the first note in a symphony of redemption. Cast out Milarepa, his mother and his sister were reduced to beggars in their own village. The once proud home became a memory, replaced by cold nights and the sting of neighbors' pitying glances. Kyungsa's heart burned, not with surrender but with a mother's fierce love. She whispered to her son under starlit skies, her voice a blade cloaked in velvet. "Learn the dark arts, my child. Let those who wronged us taste the bitterness we endure." Her words were not born of malice alone, but of desperation, a mother's plea to reclaim what was stolen. Can you hear the crackle of that fire in her voice, the kind that could set a boy's heart ablaze? It's a spark that draws you deeper, isn't it? You want to know what happens when a boy heeds such a call? Milarepa, now a youth with eyes that held both innocence and a growing shadow, obeyed. He sought a master of black magic, a figure cloaked in mystery, whose name was whispered only in fear. In hidden caves, where the air thrummed with unseen forces, Milarepa learned to bend the elements to his will. Spells rolled off his tongue like thunder, each syllable a step further from the boy he once was. The teachings were not merely of power, but of vengeance, a seductive promise that justice could be carved with incantations. Imagine the rush, the thrill of commanding storms, of feeling invincible in a world that had stripped you bare. It's intoxicating, isn't it? But hold that thought, for every step into darkness casts a longer shadow. With his newfound power, Milarepa returned to his village, his heart a cauldron of rage and purpose. His mother's words echoed, "Make them pay," and pay they did. He summoned a hailstorm, not of ice but of destruction, that tore through his uncle's fields and home. The village quaked as roofs collapsed, and the cries of those who had mocked his family filled the air. For a moment, Milarepa stood tall, a god among mortals, his vengeance a cold balm to his wounds. But as the dust settled, what did he see? Not triumph, but faces twisted in fear, faces of kin, of neighbors, of a community he once called home. The dopamine of revenge faded, leaving a hollow ache. Have you ever tasted a victory that turned to ash in your mouth? Stay with me, for this is where the story turns, where the boy begins to glimpse the cost of his choices. The village whispered of Milarepa's deeds, not with awe, but with dread. He was no longer the boy who played in the fields. He was a specter, a wielder of curses. His mother, seeing the destruction, rejoiced at first, her heart briefly soothed by retribution. But Milarepa felt no peace. Each night the faces of those he harmed haunted his dreams, not with anger, but with sorrow. The spells that once felt like power now clung to him like chains. What is it about the human heart that craves justice yet recoils at its price? You feel it too, don't you? This pull to know what comes next, to see if a soul can climb out of its own darkness. Word of his actions spread beyond the village, carried on the winds to distant valleys. It reached the ears of those who walked a different path, those who knew that true power lies not in bending the world, but in transforming the self. Among them was Marpa, a master whose name was synonymous with wisdom, a man who saw not just the deeds of men but the potential within them. Milarepa, now a young man, stood at a crossroads. The black magic that had once felt like salvation was now a weight, each spell a reminder of the lives he had shattered. Could he turn back? Could a heart stained by vengeance find a new rhythm? The answer lies ahead, and you won't want to miss it, for the journey from here is one of trials, tears, and a light that pierces even the deepest night. But before we step into that light, linger here a moment. Picture Milarepa standing alone, the wind tugging at his robes, his eyes searching the horizon. He is not yet the saint of songs, not yet the yogi whose name would echo through centuries. He is a man wrestling with his own soul, caught between the boy he was and the being he might become. The path to awakening is not a straight line. It is a spiral, a dance of falling and rising. And you, dear reader, are now part of this dance. You can't look away, can you? The story of Milarepa is no mere tale. It is a mirror, reflecting the shadows and sparks within us all. Keep walking with me, for the next step will reveal a man named Marpa, and a trial that will test the very limits of the human spirit, the Crucible of Surrender. The wind that once carried Milarepa's curses now bore a new whisper, one that tugged at the edges of his restless heart. It spoke of a man named Marpa, a teacher whose eyes saw not just the deeds of men but the hidden seeds of their becoming. Milarepa, standing at the crossroads of his guilt, felt the weight of his past like stones in his chest. The black magic that had once surged through him now felt like a poison, its thrill replaced by a gnawing emptiness. Have you ever stood at such a threshold, where every step forward feels like a leap into the unknown? Hold that feeling, for it is the pulse that drives this tale forward, pulling you deeper into a journey that promises to unravel the very fabric of a soul. Milarepa set out, his feet tracing paths through valleys where prayer flags danced like fleeting thoughts. The journey to Marpa was not just across mountains but through the tangled wilderness of his own mind. Each step stirred memories of his mother's fierce love, of the storms he unleashed, of faces twisted in fear. Yet something else stirred too, a flicker of hope, fragile as a flame in a gale. What is it about hope that makes us chase it, even when the path is steep and uncertain? You feel it, don't you? This urge to see where this flicker leads, to know if it can grow into a blaze. When Milarepa reached Marpa's dwelling, he found no grand temple, only a modest house nestled against the earth, as if it grew from the mountains themselves. Marpa was no ethereal sage floating above the world. He was a man of flesh and fire, his presence both commanding and inscrutable. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, seemed to pierce Milarepa's very soul, seeing the boy, the sorcerer, and the penitent all at once. "What do you seek?" Marpa asked, his voice a blade that cut through pretense. Milarepa, trembling, spoke of redemption, of washing clean the stains of his past. But words, like leaves in the wind, can scatter without weight. Marpa's gaze held no pity, only a challenge. "Prove you are worthy." Can you imagine standing before such a teacher, your heart laid bare, knowing the path to salvation will not be gentle? Stay with me, for this is where the true forging begins. Marpa set Milarepa to work, not with mantras or meditations, but with labor that broke the body and tested the spirit. He commanded Milarepa to build a tower of stone, alone, with no tools but his hands, and no help but his will. Day after day, Milarepa hauled rocks, his palms bleeding, his back bent under their weight. The sun scorched his skin, and the nights offered no reprieve, only the ache of muscles and the echo of Marpa's words. Build. There was no explanation, no promise of enlightenment, only the task. Picture it. A man who once commanded storms, now humbled by stones, each one a mirror of his past sins. Yet something kept him going, a spark, a whisper that this suffering held meaning. Have you ever toiled without knowing why, driven by a faith you cannot name? That's the thread that binds you to this story, urging you to see what lies beyond the next stone. When the tower was nearly complete, Marpa appeared, his face unreadable. "Tear it down," he said, pointing to the structure Milarepa had poured his sweat and soul into. The words struck like a thunderbolt. Tear it down? After weeks of labor, of blistered hands and sleepless nights, Milarepa's heart rebelled, a flicker of the old anger rising. But Marpa's eyes held him, unyielding, and in that gaze, Milarepa glimpsed something. A test not of strength, but of surrender. With a trembling breath, he began to dismantle the tower, stone by stone, each one falling like a piece of his pride. Can you feel the weight of that moment? The choice to let go when every fiber screams to hold on? It's a choice that tugs at you, isn't it? Pulling you deeper into this tale of breaking and becoming. Again and again, Marpa set Milarepa to build towers, only to demand they be torn down. 3 times he built, 3 times he destroyed, each cycle stripping away layers of ego, of the sorcerer who once thought he could bend the world to his will. The village whispered of Marpa's cruelty, but Milarepa began to see otherwise. Each stone he lifted was a karmic debt repaid. Each tower undone was a step toward unmaking the self that had caused so much pain. The labor was not punishment but purification, a fire to burn away the dross of his past. Buddhist wisdom teaches that suffering, when embraced, becomes a teacher. Have you ever found truth in your own struggles, a lesson hidden in the ache? You're nodding inside, aren't you, eager to know how this fire shapes Milarepa's soul? Yet the trials were not only physical. Marpa's words cut deeper than any stone. You, who wielded death, think enlightenment comes easily, he would say, his voice a whip that lashed at Milarepa's doubts. One day, as Milarepa sat exhausted, Marpa tossed him a scrap of cloth, barely enough to cover his wounds. "Sew a robe," he commanded. Milarepa, no tailor, fumbled with the needle, his fingers clumsy, his heart heavy with frustration. The robe was a mockery, ragged, ill-fitting, a symbol of his inadequacy. Yet Marpa's wife, Damima, watched from the shadows, her eyes soft with compassion. She offered Milarepa a bowl of warm broth, a fleeting kindness that felt like rain on parched earth. That small act, can you feel its warmth? It's a reminder that even in the harshest trials there are glimmers of grace that keep us tethered to hope. The days bled into months, and Milarepa's body grew lean, his spirit raw. He began to understand that Marpa's demands were not arbitrary but a mirror, reflecting the chaos within him. The towers, the robe, the endless tasks, they were not the path but the tools to carve it. Buddhist teachings speak of the mind as a wild horse, untamed until a master guides it. Marpa was that master, and Milarepa, the horse, was learning to yield. But yielding is not defeat. It is the courage to become something new. Have you ever felt yourself breaking, only to find a stronger self beneath? That's the pulse of this story, and it's why you can't look away, why you need to know what happens when Milarepa's trials reach their crescendo. As the seasons turned, Milarepa's heart began to shift. The anger that once fueled his spells was fading, replaced by a quiet resolve. He no longer saw Marpa as a tyrant, but as a guide, one who walked the razor's edge between compassion and rigor. The towers he built and tore down were not just stone, they were his own illusions, his clinging to a self that no longer served. Yet the path was far from over. Marpa's greatest test loomed, one that would demand not just Milarepa's strength, but his trust in the unseen. What does it take to surrender fully, to step into a fire not knowing if it will burn or transform? You're on the edge of your seat, aren't you? Craving the moment when Milarepa faces that fire. Keep walking with me, for the next step will reveal a truth that could light up even the darkest corners of your own heart, the song of awakening. The mountain air grew thinner as Milarepa's trials deepened, each day a chisel carving away at the remnants of his former self. Marpa's unrelenting demands, building towers only to tear them down, sewing robes that mocked his efforts, had stripped Milarepa to his core, leaving a man both broken and unburdened. Yet the hardest test was still to come, a trial not of stone or thread, but of the heart's willingness to surrender completely. Can you feel the tension in that moment? The edge of a precipice where one step could mean ruin or redemption. Stay with me, for this is where Milarepa's story turns from struggle to something luminous, a light that will beckon you to the very end. Marpa summoned Milarepa one dawn, the sky streaked with gold, as if the heavens themselves were watching. "You seek the Dharma," Marpa said, his voice steady but heavy with intent. "But your sins are a mountain. Are you ready to climb it?" Milarepa, his body scarred from labor, his spirit raw from doubt, nodded. He had no words left, only a quiet resolve that burned brighter than his old rage. Marpa's eyes softened for the first time, but his command was unyielding. Go to the caves, meditate alone, let go of everything. The caves, high, cold, and silent, were no sanctuary but a crucible. Imagine stepping into such solitude, where the only companion is your own mind, with all its shadows and whispers. Would you dare to face it? That question pulls you forward, doesn't it? Eager to see if Milarepa can endure. In the caves, Milarepa sat, his breath mingling with the icy air. No food, no fire, only a thin robe against the biting cold. Days bled into nights, and hunger gnawed at his body, but he turned inward, guided by Marpa's teachings. The Dharma, he learned, was not a gift handed down but a truth uncovered through discipline. He chanted mantras, each syllable a step deeper into stillness. The faces of those he had harmed, his uncle, his neighbors, rose in his mind, not as enemies but as teachers, their pain a mirror of his own. Buddhist wisdom teaches that all beings are bound by karma, yet all can be freed by understanding. Milarepa began to see his actions not as stains but as lessons, each one a thread in the tapestry of awakening. Have you ever glimpsed such a truth in your own pain, a spark that changes how you see the world? You're nodding inside, aren't you, drawn to know how this insight transforms him? The solitude was merciless. Hunger twisted his stomach, and the cold seeped into his bones. Yet Milarepa persisted. Visions came, demons born of his guilt, tempting him to flee, to return to the world of spells and vengeance. But Marpa's voice echoed in his mind. The mind is the root of all suffering and all liberation. Milarepa faced each demon, not with force but with compassion, seeing them as illusions of his own making. Slowly, the visions faded, and in their place came a stillness so profound it felt like the mountains themselves were breathing with him. This was no mere calm, but a glimpse of emptiness, the Buddhist truth that all things, self, pain, even time, are fleeting. Can you imagine such a moment, where the world falls away and you touch something eternal? It's a pull that keeps you here, craving the culmination of his journey. Years passed in the caves, Milarepa's body wasting to a shadow, sustained only by nettles and the fire of his practice. Word of his asceticism spread, drawing pilgrims who saw not a sorcerer but a yogi, his eyes alight with a peace that defied his frail form. Marpa, hearing of his disciples' progress, called him back. When Milarepa emerged, he was no longer the man who had arrived broken and desperate. His steps were light, his gaze steady, as if he carried the mountains within him. Marpa greeted him not with commands, but with a rare smile. "You have built the true tower," he said, "not of stone, but of wisdom." In that moment, Milarepa understood. Every trial, every stone, every torn-down dream had been a step toward this awakening. The dopamine of vengeance had long faded. In its place was a joy that needed no cause, a freedom that needed no chains. Have you ever felt such a shift where the weight of your past becomes the wings of your present? You feel it now, don't you? This urge to see how his story ripples outward. Milarepa's awakening was not the end, but a beginning. He wandered Tibet's valleys and peaks, singing songs of realization that wove Buddhist truths into melodies. His words, raw and radiant, spoke of impermanence, of the futility of clinging, of the boundless compassion that arises when the self dissolves. Villagers who once feared him now gathered to listen, their hearts stirred by a man who had walked through darkness and emerged whole. His songs were not mere poetry, but maps, guiding others toward the same light he had found. Even his uncle, broken by his own greed, came to hear him, tears falling as Milarepa spoke of forgiveness, not as a gift to others, but as a release for oneself. Picture that scene. A man who once summoned storms now offering peace, his voice a bridge between hearts. Doesn't it make you wonder what bridges you could build in your own life? As Milarepa's fame grew, so did his humility. He sought no glory, no throne, only caves and solitude where he could deepen his practice. His life became a testament to the Buddhist path, that no sin is too great, no heart too heavy to find liberation. When death came, it was not an end, but a dissolution, his body said to dissolve into light, a final teaching that even flesh is impermanent. His songs, though, lingered, carried on the winds, etched into the hearts of those who heard them. They echo even now, centuries later, whispering that the path to awakening is open to all who dare to walk it. Can you hear that whisper, calling you to look within, to find your own path through the shadows? It's why you've stayed, isn't it, to reach this moment where Milarepa's light touches your own. And so, the tale of Milarepa closes, not with a final note, but with an invitation. His journey, from a boy betrayed, to a sorcerer consumed, to a yogi awakened, mirrors the potential within us all. The Buddhist path he walked teaches that every fall is a chance to rise, every wound a door to wisdom. As you sit with these words, feel the pulse of his story in your own heart. What towers must you build and tear down? What caves must you enter to find your own light? The answers are not out there but within, waiting for you to take the first step. You can't look away now, can you? For Milarepa's song is yours too, a melody of struggle, surrender, and the boundless freedom that awaits.